Welcome to the Dyslexia Mom Life Podcast, your go-to podcast for dyslexia education and community. As moms, we want the best for our children, and when you're raising a child with dyslexia, that journey comes with unique twists and turns. Each week, we dive into dyslexia topics along with episodes on how to thrive in your dyslexia season as a mom, all with the goal of helping your child and your family thrive. Tune in for conversations that will inspire, inform, and connect you with a community that truly understands. You are not alone. We're in this together. Subscribe now and join in the conversation and community. You got this.
Hey friend, before we get started today, I wanted to give a shout out and a big thanks to Tara, Mandy, and Stephanie who jumped on a call with me Saturday to learn more about their journey and just to really dive more into dyslexia and have some more conversations for some research that I'm doing. So thank you so much for the three of them jumping on for a quick call. Now today, we're going to be diving into a topic that so many of you have reached out about, and that is navigating dyslexia in a private school. Maybe you chose a private school for smaller class sizes, or maybe a faith-based education, or a strong academic reputation. But now you've realized your child is struggling with reading, spelling, or writing, maybe math, and you're wondering, does this school really have the support my child needs? I've been there. So our journey along the way has all been in private schools, and although myself and my husband both work in public schools, our daughter has gone to private school the entire time from pre-K up through 8th grade now, and we intend on continuing that into 12th grade as well. Ours is more of a journey of all the things that I just said a moment ago, which was it was really important to us to have a faith-based education for her, and it was really important to us, especially fundamentally at those elementary ages, to have that really small class size that she could get those fundamentals and those foundation pieces laid. Little did we know we were going to be walking this dyslexia journey. So as you think about those pieces and as you think about, where you might currently be, you may have realized that, and although our daughter had attended a private school, at one point when we get to first grade and we realize we are walking a different journey than we had originally anticipated for her as it relates to a private education and what we were hoping to accomplish with those fundamental years and those foundational years in elementary school. It wasn't until we realized that there were some other things happening. And as I was thinking through those things, I had to then rely back on the school we were at. And we really enjoyed her school. She loved her school. She had some really good friends there. The teachers were excellent, but they were like, we've taken her as far as we can take her, right? With sincerely tears in her eyes. We've taken her as far as we can take her. And that's when I realized if I wanted her to have the right support, I had to be the one to make that happen, not the teacher. We had to do that as a family, and I had to start deciding, what information do I need to bring to our family to have these conversations on what is best for her? And was it going to be to stay in the Christian private school we were in and supplement the dyslexia remediation after school? At that point, we realized the current remediation plan we were on with independent tutoring after school with a very trained, very highly reputable OG fellow, it just wasn't enough what we were getting. And when I say that, I mean she was going to that tutoring once a week after school for that additional reading. And then we were also having once a week that we were also doing private speech therapy in addition to what we were doing during the school day for some speech therapy. So I had to be thinking about what are our next steps. And then we stumbled into a dyslexia school, and really because we went to a parenting session and learned more about dyslexia, but then just really fell in love with that school. So from there, we actually ended up staying there for several years and then pivoting to a private school that not the best fit, and now we've pivoted again. So I have made this transition a few times, and I always have to think about what's the best for her and what support does she need. So I'm going to share with you what I've learned, the good, the bad, and the real talk about navigating dyslexia in a private school setting. So some things you're going to learn in this episode: how to identify if your child's private school is equipped to support your dyslexic kiddo, your rights and options as a parent, yes, even in a private school, what to do if the school isn't meeting your child's needs, and how to advocate for the right interventions while keeping your relationship with the school strong. Now, I know, grab your favorite beverage, might be coffee. For me, it's probably a bottled water with some caffeine shake in it. But grab your favorite beverage, take a deep breath, and let's dive in. Let's start with dyslexia in a private school. I mean, what is the difference there? Well, first, let's talk about private schools and how they handle dyslexia differently than public schools. So unlike the public schools, which are required by law to provide special education services under what they call the IDEA, which is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, private schools do not have to offer that same level of support. However, a caveat there is if they've received federal funding, and this happened a good bit during COVID, then some of those federal laws they may be required to adhere to. There's actually a federal website you can go on and you can type in your school's name. I will put that in the show notes for you in case you're curious, and it will tell you if your school has received federal funding and what school years. That's helpful to know because a school's not necessarily going to tell you that. So, what does that mean, though? It means that your child may not have access to an IEP program. You won't have access to due process rights for your state Department of Education, okay? And some schools, some private schools, they do offer some type of structured literacy program. And some schools, especially in the Atlanta area, we have a good number of dyslexia schools, but we also have private schools in our area that have dyslexia programs and interventions built into the private curriculum. So you have to figure out, and then others don't have either, right? And then the other part of that also means that the level of teacher training in dyslexia really varies widely from school to school. This is why I always tell moms, don't assume your school understands dyslexia. You have to ask some questions. Think about, for example, when you first approach a school about struggles, and if you were to ask, do you have any teachers trained in Orton Gillingham or structured literacy? If you get blank stares back, then what that will tell you is that, it tells you all that you need to know because it says to you that they're not familiar with dyslexia. But I've also spoken with moms who have amazing support in their private schools, so it really depends on the school. And I was just talking to a mom over the weekend, and she was even sharing at her private school, although they were not able to meet the dyslexia needs, she came to the school with a solution and said, hey, we're going to need to pull her out the last 2 periods of the day because we're going to take her for some specific structured literacy program with some local intervention. And so she was able to leave a few days a week, it not count against her, and she, as far as attendance is what I mean. So she was able to get that individual one-on-one support that she needed to be successful. Well, let's talk about some signs. What are some signs that your private school is or isn't dyslexia friendly? How do you know if your private school is equipped to support dyslexia? Here are a few green flags and red flags to look for in private schools. So what are some good signs, some green flags, if you will, and this will be aired on St. Patrick's Day, so I love the green flag analogy there. So happy St. Patrick's Day if you're listening to this on the day that this episode drops. But we're looking for these green flags, these good signs, and those would be that the school acknowledges dyslexia as a real learning difference. It could be that the school offers Orton Gillingham-based reading intervention or structured literacy programs. It also could look like they have learning specialists or tutors trained in dyslexia. And every school my daughter has been at, they've called it something different, whether it was directed studies, whether it was a learning lab. Schools will call it different acronyms or different things, but you're really looking at, do they have specialists on board who are learning specialists, and are they trained in dyslexia? Those are some questions. And if they do, that is a green flag. It could be that all their elementary teachers are trained. That's great. That structured literacy piece is pivotal for all kids. And they could be, another green flag is that they're open to reasonable accommodations. And so when you think about those pieces, they're open to having conversations about extra time on tests, use of audiobooks, use of Grammarly, other things that will help your child be successful. And a lot of schools will not do what they call modifications, and that's pretty typical. So what that looks like is your child would not do the same work as everybody else. An accommodation provides them the opportunity to do the same work, but it might take them longer, right? It might take them longer on a test, so they would get that additional extended time. They may have a separate location, a learning lab or something where a child could go to. And the schools we've been at, they have those because a good bit of the kids are ADHD that are in there as well, and they need a quiet place to test. And the other thing that is a green flag is that the teachers are willing to collaborate with you to support your child. Anytime you can build those relationships and people really, you can tell, sincerely care about your child, gosh, that makes it so difficult when you have to make a different decision. But the fact that they're willing and interested in collaborating with you, I mean, every school should do that, but unfortunately that's just not where we live right now, then that definitely is a green flag. Well, here are some warning signs. Here's some red flags. The school believes kids just need to try harder or will grow out of it. So if you share with them that your child's having some struggles learning to read, maybe there's some dyslexia history in your family, and you say, I'm really concerned there may be some dyslexia here, and their response is, well, we see that your child's just not trying hard enough. They need to read more. Just wait. It's developmental. They'll grow out of it. And that's not always the truth, right? Many times our kids get labeled in a wrong way. So those are some things to look for. There are no specialists trained in dyslexia or any reading interventions. It's pivotal right now. I mean, when you look at, as a country, the percentages of children that are not reading proficiently by third grade is astounding, really. And so really everybody, public, private, doesn't matter. They really should be investing in. And two, the other thing that's interesting is, well, I was going to say investing in making sure there's reading interventions in schools, even in private schools, until we get to a point, I'm not going to get on my soapbox, but until we get to the point where our higher education programs for teachers really include a lot of reading intervention, we're going to be playing this catch-up game. We just are, until we can get teachers trained. And if you see or you hear them say back to you and they're very resistant of making any accommodations, or they don't really understand why your child needs them, that is a warning sign. If they're like, nope, everybody does the same thing, we're just not providing anything additional, then that's a red flag. They discourage outside testing or private tutoring. So if they're not on board with you, maybe you have a great private school that's like, we have done all we can do. That's kind of where we were. But we will love on your child, but we cannot provide her that additional multiple touch points a week, right? So then, but they very much were encouraging and supportive of the private tutoring we were having at that time, right? So if you see that they're discouraging you from that, like your child will just grow out of this, there's no need to go get testing, then that's a red flag. Your child's self-esteem is plummeting because they feel like they're failing, or unfortunately, unfortunately, we will hear, a child say, I feel stupid, I'm just dumb. They get really frustrated and deflated, and they give up on themselves. When your child's self-esteem, and they will, unfortunately, maybe not to that degree, but they will feel it. I mean, my daughter was in first grade, and we're still dealing with some pieces from that. It is going to happen. But when you start seeing some plummeting and you start seeing some real pivots about how your child feels about their self-worth, ma'am, that's a red flag. So when I started really noticing red flags for our daughter, I mean, I did at the first felt really lost. And I kept just thinking, I thought we chose a school because we thought it was the best place for her. So why does it feel like she's being left behind now, right? Like it's a real feeling. It's a real issue. And, although they very much knew what dyslexia looked like and we had a reading specialist on site, they could only do so much within the school hours of the day to really provide what she needed. And when we really started pivoting from making some decisions was when the headaches and the stomach aches started. And although she loved to see her friends, it was a struggle in first grade when she was really struggling to learn sight words and was struggling to learn to read, and really much was feeling that around the room as she was sitting among her other classmates. And so we were starting to see the teacher would call, who loved and adored her, still love and adore this teacher. She would call and say, she's complaining of a stomach ache. And so, I realized quickly that there's something more going on here. And so that's really when we had to start making some real drastic decisions, really. So if you're in that place right now, I see you, I do, and I promise there are steps you can take to support your child. So let's talk about advocacy and your options as a parent. If you suspect your child has dyslexia, or you've already had a diagnosis or identification, then you may be asking, what can you do now? Well, let's just take it step by step. So step one, and don't worry, you don't have to write these down. They'll be in the show notes, and I'll leave a link to that so you can pop onto the website and grab all these notes. So step one, get a professional evaluation. If your child has not been formally evaluated yet, this is your first step. Many private schools don't test for dyslexia, so you may need to speak to a private evaluator, a licensed psychologist, or an educational specialist. For us, we were able to have our local public school test our daughter, and then many years later when we got ready to transition her in, or to transition her out of, I guess, this dyslexia school, I really wanted to know, as we were going into middle school, like, where has she grown? Where has her progress grown? What do we need for additional accommodations? And so we were able to get the public school to do the first one. We paid privately to get the second evaluation done. We were able to find a place actually that accepted our health insurance because evaluations in Georgia are pretty pricey. But at the same time, I wish now I had got a professional evaluation at the very start because it gave us so much more about her learning profile that I did not know at the beginning that I wish I had. And so if there are other concerns with anxiety or ADHD or even another diagnosis of writing disability or difference or struggle, whatever it might be. It's a lot more thorough because they're not looking at a pocket of one specific thing they're trying to solve for. They're looking at your whole child. So I would really encourage you to get that professional evaluation, and that might be tapping into your community to find, that's how I found out. Another mom said, well, I used this psychologist and he took our insurance. So it was like less than $400, where when I had called around to other places in Atlanta, it was anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000, and this was years ago, to do an evaluation. But the one that we did find that accepted our insurance really was a game changer. And some of the moms I talked to over the weekend as well said the same thing. They used a private evaluator, and they felt like they got such a robust response and report that it was so, so helpful navigating their child's profile and what they needed to do for step two, was meeting with the school. So once you have that evaluation in hand, and so you have specifically, like, these are the areas your child is struggling in, these are the areas of strength, and then for us, we got like 4 pages of accommodations that we could choose from. So that was very powerful as we transferred into a Christian private school to be able to say, here are the accommodations, and that it just opened a door to a conversation. So once you have that evaluation done, then you can meet with your school and you could talk with the teacher, learning specialist, or even the principal, however your school kind of structures those meetings. And here's some things that you wouldn't want to bring. You would want to bring that evaluation. You may even want to provide it ahead of time so they can review it. And examples of where you see your child struggling, and a list of possible accommodations. So although we have 4 pages of accommodations, there is no way all of those are going to happen in a building. And there's no way a teacher could manage those, or your child can self-advocate for those as they get older. So a list of possible accommodations that really lend your child to be successful with where they are currently struggling. So, and keep in mind too, one thing that works really well is approaching this as a team effort. Going in and demanding things is the first place that turns people off. So although this is a very emotional time and a very high stress time, it is so much more important for you to go at this as a collaborative conversation. And for example, like, how can we work together? How can we work together to support my child? And here are some things we found out. And it's so interesting because you will look back and be like, oh, I missed all those signs. Like, there are going to be things you're going to find in your journey that you were like, oh, yeah, definitely does that. So having that conversation with the school and meeting with them to see like what's going on, what are the options at the school as far as accommodations and any type of remediation. Step 3 would be considering outside support. So if your school can't provide your child with specifics that they need, then you will have to consider outside tutoring. with, for example, an Orton Gillingham trained tutor is what we use a lot in the Georgia area, and it is a game changer. There's just a structured literacy approach to remediating a student. You're not quote fixing dyslexia. It can't be what's the word I'm looking for? It can't be remediated to a point where it's no longer there, right? It can't be, I guess, cured. That's the word I was looking for. It can't be cured, right? At the end of the day, your child is dyslexic. So embrace that, okay? But getting the resources that she or he needs so then they know the rules, right? You know the rules, you can play the game, right? So when your child knows the reading rules and they learn those rules, then it is a game changer for the day, right, as far as their daily interactions in school. And so many times in private schools, you may have a school that has internal resources, but you may also have to have some one-on-one, because one-on-one support with your child and a tutor, your child and a reading specialist really is a game changer. You can move the needle a lot quicker, and the more days they meet as well. Number 4, know your options. So you've got to think about, despite your best efforts, a private school just isn't the right fit. That happens sometimes. I know families who have supplemented, like I said earlier in the conversation, with outside services while still staying at their same private school, which may be an option for you if you have multiple children. You may not want to move one child to another school. It either might cause a burden for carpool, or it's just that you want to keep your family unit together. And so it might be that having that outside services that you have to do might be, maybe your best option. So knowing those options are so important. You may decide that you want to move to a different private school that has better dyslexia support. That is an option. Another option could be transitioning to a public school for some stronger support services. If you're in a state that has some really strong structured literacy programs, it does not hurt for you to reach out and learn more about what they have to offer. Those are usually in smaller group settings, and so we chose not to go that direction, but in your state it could be different, in your local school district could be different. So just knowing what those options are will help you feel more comfortable about the decisions you have to make. And if you're not sure, go to your local school district, or go to Dr. Google, as we say. Go to Google, type in your school district's name and dyslexia. It's going to pull up any resources from your local school district, and you'll be able to see how much they actually support students, what do they have out there, and they have public facing. And almost always, they're going to have a person of reference there with a name, an email, and possibly a phone number. Reach out to them. Let them know, this is my local public school, and I want to know what you offer. If, though, that is not an option, if that's not the direction you want to go, you have multiple children, or you really want your child to stay where they are because you probably didn't flippantly choose the school you're at now if you're in a private school. You probably made some very deliberate decisions when you chose that school. So now you have to figure out, can this current school support this child in their dyslexia journey? If not, is there a way to supplement that? It could be having a tutor come to the school. Some will do that. It could be, like I said earlier, checking them out or checking them in. Or it could be additional work after school. I really hate that option because school days are so long, but sometimes that's the only option we have. The biggest piece about knowing your options is trust yourself. You know what's best for your child. I promise you do. I know right now, if you're on this journey and you're just starting out, or you recently started your journey, or you're just circling back to be like, am I making the right choice here? You have to trust yourself. You have to trust what you know about your child. You're the only one that knows that. An educator can't tell you 100% what is best. And as a mom, you have to determine too what is sometimes best for the entire family, right? And it might not be pivoting to drive. Like we were in a place where we could move across Atlanta and sell a house and literally move over an hour away from where we were, because we only have one child. So we were in a place where we could make that happen. And then finally, encouragement. I love that word. Encouragement and inspiration. Love those things. So encouragement for the journey. Believe me, I know how overwhelming this can all feel, especially as you're starting to walk down this road. And I've walked this road ahead of you a few times in a couple different ways, pivoting. I've sat in on meetings with administrators. I've really had to have some tough conversations with teachers as it related to accommodations that I didn't feel like we were doing with fidelity at a private school, and we've had to have those conversations. And I've also been in a place where I've wondered and I've cried about and I've worried about and I've prayed about, am I doing enough? Am I making the right decision? And guess what? You can only do the best you can do for right now. Okay? And if you have to make a change later, guess what? It's okay. We make changes. It helps you and your family be more resilient. And the changes might be a new school, or the changes may be doing something after school. Whatever you have to do to support your child through the remediation. But also remember, you got to figure out what your child needs, what lights your child up. Where are their strengths? Where can I also, if you've got a school, for example, that maybe you're choosing to stay with the private school because they have a very strong drama program or a chorus program or an athletic, team, and you're like, I just really need them to be part of something that's outside of the classroom, right? That's a great reason to stay. It absolutely is. We want to really lean into our children being successful in other areas so that they do feel that self-esteem and that self-worth that they are worthy, right? They are. Reading is tough. K-12 is going to be tough. But there are other things in their life that can bring them joy. So let me tell you something that's important, regardless of everything else I've told you today. But let me tell you something. It's just the most important thing I'm going to tell you today. You are exactly the mom your child needs. Yep, I'm going to say it again. You are exactly the mom your child needs. Sometimes it's going to be a struggle, right? It may be many days are a struggle, but at the end of the day, thank God your child came to you. You're listening to the podcast, and if you're still listening today, I commend you because you're listening to the very end to make sure I don't miss anything, right? And that lets me know that you are invested and you are all in, and your child sees you. And they might not say it today, but you're making a difference for them. So thank you for that. Your child will thank you later. If this was helpful, please share it with another mom who needs to hear this. And if you're loving the podcast, I'd be so grateful if you would leave a review on Apple Podcast. That's a way for other moms to locate us as well. So remember, until next time, you got this, and I'm cheering for you every step of the way. Remember, you are not alone.